shadow people, dark, humanoid figures seen by countless individuals across the world. Some claim they're ghosts, others believe they're interdimensional beings, and skeptics call them tricks of the mind. But what if there's something else entirely? Tonight, we dive deep into terrifying real-life encounters that will make you question what lurks in the darkness. I never believed in ghosts, or demons, or anything supernatural, really. I grew up in a family that valued logic and reason above all else. If I couldn't see it, touch it, or prove it, it wasn't real. But that all changed the night I saw him. It started subtly. At first, I would wake up in the middle of the night with a strange, unshakable feeling that I wasn't alone. I'd glance around my dimly lit room, my heart pounding, but nothing seemed out of place. The shadows cast by the moon through my curtains shifted slightly with the wind. My furniture sat still, and the door remained firmly shut. Everything was normal, but I didn't feel normal. The first time I actually saw it, I was convinced I was dreaming. I woke up, eyes fluttering open, my breath catching in my throat before I even knew why. My room was cold, far colder than it should have been in the middle of summer. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, trying to shake the eerie sensation creeping up my spine. That's when I noticed it. A tall, human-shaped shadow stood at the foot of my bed. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a distortion of my sleepy mind. But as I blinked, it remained, and it was watching me. I didn't see its eyes, yet somehow I felt its gaze. It wasn't just standing there, it was staring, as if studying me, waiting for something. I couldn't move. My body refused to listen to me. I wanted to scream, to kick, to run, but my limbs were heavy, like they didn't belong to me. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen in fear. Seconds? Minutes? An hour? Time didn't feel real anymore. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe. Then it moved. Not fast, not jerky, just a single step. Slow. Deliberate. A scream lodged itself in my throat, but it wouldn't come out. I clenched my fists beneath the blanket, my fingernails digging into my palms. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, so loud I was sure it could hear it too. It took another step, and another. I finally found my voice, a pathetic, choked whimper escaping me. The moment the sound left my lips, the shadow stopped. It stood still for a few more seconds before it simply faded, like smoke dissolving into the air. I stayed awake until morning. When the sun finally rose, bathing my room in warm light, I told myself it was just a bad dream. Nothing more, but it wasn't. The next night, I pushed my desk chair against my bedroom door before I went to bed. I left the lamp on. I even slept with my phone clutched in my hand, ready to call for help if I needed to. I barely slept, too afraid of what might happen if I let myself drift off. At 3 a.m., I heard it. A whisper. My eyes snapped open, my body rigid with fear. I held my breath, straining to hear it again. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was the wind. Then I heard it again, this time closer. "Hello," I whispered, barely able to force the word past my lips. Silence. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely hold it. I turned on the screen, the soft glow of light illuminating my trembling hands. My mind screamed at me to turn on the flashlight, to shine it around the room. But I was afraid of what I might see. Then, in the reflection of my phone screen, I saw it. Behind me. Standing right behind me. I didn't think. I just reacted. I threw myself out of bed, hitting the floor so hard that pain shot at my arm. My breath came in ragged gasps as I scrambled backward. My eyes locked on the empty space where the reflection had shown it standing. But it was gone. The next morning, I packed a bag and left. I didn't care where I went. I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. But the worst part? I still see it. Sometimes in the corner of my vision. I catch glimpses of that impossibly dark figure standing just beyond the reach of light. And sometimes when I wake up in the dead of night, I can still feel it watching me, waiting. Emily was only 12 when she first saw it, just a fleeting shadow, a dark blur moving across her bedroom wall. At first, she convinced herself it was just a trick of the light, maybe the headlights from a passing car outside. But then it happened again and again. It wasn't just her imagination. The first few nights, she lay in bed, pulling the covers over her head, willing herself to sleep. If she ignored it, maybe it would go away. But then came the whispers. At first, they were so faint that she thought they were just the house settling, or the wind sneaking through the old wooden frame of her window. But the more she listened, the more she realized these weren't ordinary sounds. They were voices. Low, murmuring voices that seemed to slither from the darkest corner of her room. She couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was unmistakable, hushed and insistent, like someone speaking just below the threshold of understanding. The first time she heard it, she thought it was her parents talking in the hallway. She got up, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, and cracked her door open. The hall was dark, silent. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs. She turned back toward her bed, and the whispers began again. Emily's stomach twisted into a knot. She turned on her bedside lamp, the warm yellow glow pushing back the shadows. But no matter how brightly the light shone, it couldn't reach the farthest corner of the room. It was darker there, as if the light simply refused to touch it. That was where the whispers came from. For weeks, the same routine played out. Every night, the whispers came, growing bolder as she grew more terrified. She tried everything, leaving the lights on, sleeping with the TV humming softly in the background, even playing music from her phone. But nothing stopped them. The shadow remained. Some nights, she swore she saw it move, stretching along the floor, pooling against the walls like spilled ink. Other nights, it stayed in the corner, watching. Always watching. The worst part? Her parents didn't believe her. "It's just a dream, sweetheart," her mother would say, brushing her hair back and kissing her forehead. "Sounds like your imagination's running wild." Her father added with a chuckle, "Try reading a book before bed instead of those scary shows." But Emily knew it wasn't just her imagination. She wasn't crazy. One night, the fear became unbearable. As the whispers filled her room once again, she clenched her fist beneath the blankets, her entire body trembling. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. The whispers stopped. For the first time in weeks, silence filled the room. The air grew thick, heavy. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as she stared into the darkness. And then, just as she thought it was over, a voice, clear, distinct, and chillingly close, whispered a single word. "Run." Emily's breath hitched. Her stomach turned ice cold as the word echoed in her head. She could feel the voice against her skin, as if someone had whispered it directly into her ear. She barely had time to react before she noticed something else, something far worse. The darkness in the corner of her room was shifting. No, not shifting, crawling. A tendril of blackness slithered toward her bed, stretching unnaturally, its form shifting like smoke but moving with intention. It crept forward, reaching for her, consuming the floor as it moved. Emily bolted. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She leapt from her bed, feet pounding against the wooden floor as she sprinted for the door. Her fingers fumbled against the knob, twisting, yanking. It was locked. Her breath came in short gasps as she twisted the knob frantically, her eyes darting back toward the room. The shadow was closer now. No longer just a pool of darkness, but a figure, tall, impossibly thin, featureless yet somehow aware. It loomed near her bed, its shape pulsing as if breathing. Emily let out a strangled sob, banging her fists against the door. Then, click, the lock turned on its own. She didn't wait to question it. She flung the door open and ran, her feet barely touching the carpet as she sprinted to her parents' room. She didn't care if they thought she was crazy. She needed them to believe her. Her mother stirred as Emily practically threw herself onto the bed, sobbing. Her father groggily turned on the lamp. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" her mother asked, sitting up, concern etched across her face. Emily turned, pointing back toward her bedroom door. But the hallway was empty. The whispers were gone. The shadow was gone. Only the lingering chill remained. After that night, Emily never slept in that room again. Her parents, shaken by how distraught she was, let her stay with them for a while before eventually moving her to the guest room. They never spoke about it, never acknowledged it. But sometimes in the dead of night, Emily swore she could hear it, whispering, not from her old room, not from the hallway, but from just beyond her door. It was late, well past midnight, when Daniel finally made his way to the bathroom to brush his teeth. He was exhausted. Work had been brutal, and all he wanted was to wash up and collapse in a bed. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the occasional groan of the old wooden floor beneath his feet. He turned on the bathroom light, squinting as the brightness flooded the small space. The mirror above the sink was old and slightly warped, a relic from when the building was first constructed. It had always given his reflection a slightly off-kilter look, but tonight, something about it felt different. He squeezed a dollop of toothpaste onto his brush, ran it under the water, and began brushing. The rhythmic motion was soothing in its own way, until he noticed it. A movement, just a flicker in the corner of his vision. His eyes darted up to the mirror. A tall, dark figure stood behind him. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The figure wasn't just a shadow or a trick of the light. It was solid, human-shaped but wrong. Too tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its arms hung long at its sides, fingers curling slightly like talons. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there. A wave of cold swept over him, rooting him to the spot. His mind raced. There was no one else in the apartment. He lived alone. His front door was locked. The windows were shut. And yet there it was. His pulse pounded in his ears. Slowly, he turned his head to look behind him. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. His shoulders sagged in shaky relief. A hallucination, he told himself. Just exhaustion playing tricks on him. He let out a nervous chuckle and turned back to the mirror. It was closer. Daniel's stomach twisted violently. The figure had moved, but only in the mirror. It was now just behind him, towering over his shoulder. His own reflection looked as terrified as he felt. His toothbrush slipped from his fingers, clattering into the sink. He didn't turn around this time. He couldn't. A suffocating weight pressed down on his chest, his breaths coming out in short, panicked gasps. He wanted to run, to bolt from the bathroom, but his body refused to obey. Then ever so slowly, the figure's head began to tilt. Not like a normal head tilt. No, this was something else. It bent unnaturally, as if its neck was made of liquid, bending at an impossible angle until its face, if it had one, was nearly horizontal. Daniel's reflection did not mirror the movement. He didn't remember what happened next. The next thing he knew, he was waking up on the cold bathroom floor. His head throbbed. His limbs felt heavy, as if he'd been drugged. The light above flickered weakly, casting long, warped shadows along the tiled walls. At first, he thought he had just fainted, but then he saw his arms. 3 deep, parallel scratches ran from his shoulders down to his wrists, as if something with impossibly long fingers had dragged its claws down his flesh. The wounds weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. They ached. Daniel sat up too fast, his stomach twisting in protest. His mind was a blur. How long had he been lying here? The last thing he remembered was the figure in the mirror. With a shaky breath, he turned toward the sink. The mirror was different. It was cracked, small, thin fractures spiderwebbing from where his reflection's face should have been. But the strange thing was, the real-world mirror, his mirror, was completely untouched. Only the reflection of the mirror in the glass was broken. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the dizziness that followed. And then, faintly, barely above a whisper, a voice slithered through the room. "You let me out." Daniel never spoke about that night. Never told his friends. Never saw a doctor about the scratches. But things changed after that. His reflection always seemed a little off. Sometimes, when he passed by the mirror, he thought he saw it lag a second behind. Other times, when he stared too long, He could swear the cracks in the reflection were growing, like something inside was struggling to get out. He stopped brushing his teeth with the light on, and he never looked too long into the mirror again. Shadow people remain one of the most chilling and unexplained phenomena of our time. Whether spirits, hallucinations, or something beyond our understanding, they have left their mark on history and the minds of those who encounter them. But the real question is, are you sure you're alone? If you've ever seen a shadow figure, share your experience in the comments below.